final round 7 of the GMT tournament. Action resumed with a really exciting stuff. And before we switch to the winner's game of Liem against Andrei Yesapenko, let's check what happened in the first game of Salem against the Maraji Gukesh. So they played out, which was at the beginning a Catalan opening, knight a2, knight f3, b6, short castle, bishop b7, c takes, e takes, and knight b1. So white's idea here is to play knight c3, either bishop f4 or bishop g5. So white steps back so that he can improve the knight. All of this makes perfect sense. Now after queen b3, bishop d6, the first complications appear after bishop g5, because white play bishop g5 not only with the intention to take on f6, but also provoke black to play h6. And this is exactly what happened after bishop f4, after the trade. Essentially, it was quite difficult to understand who is better, because white is going for a kingside attack while black is trying to expand at the queenside. Now, after a couple of moves, as you see, the players were strictly following the game plan. So Salem was slowly preparing an assault at the kingside. Gukesh tried to play carefully knight e6, queen e5, trade the queens, which was rejected by the top Emirati grandmaster. Rook g1, g6, f3, rook e7, a3, and yeah, it's basically just continuing the same plan, which already mentioned, but the critical moment arose here. So already about here, you could feel that black's position is quite unpleasant, because white is threatening to play e4 at some point. So Gukesh's idea was to create a pass pawn at the queen side, knight a2, b3, knight c3, and queen h3 apparently was not a good choice, because black leaves undefended the e4 square, which was immediately exploited by Salem. Also f5 and going after the black king suddenly become a real threat. Rook e8 was played, rook g3, queen h4, f5, take it, and now in the end of the complications, black was about losing. Yeah, so here you see that knight on f6 is under attack, f takes on e4, so the rest for Emirati grandmaster was a good technique. Well, we could argue maybe there was a moment where he could have played slightly better, like rook f4, king f3. Gukesh did his best trying to complicate matters by rook c1, rook c2, but in the end, there was nothing to be done. e5, the last trick from the young grandmaster from India, rook takes on c3, threatening to give a check on d5, and now, after e takes on d6, rook d3, very powerful move by Salem. Rook c1, going after the pawn on c3, and now, after knight e5, knight f6, the position repeated a couple of times, and the final trick, king e4, king g7, and beautiful shot d7. Now, the big point of this move is knight e7, rook takes on c4, the black rook on d3 is under attack, and after rook c7, rook d7, white simply collects the knight. So this was, again, one of the most exciting games of the last round 7. Then we have, of course, Arkady Nadich's game against Vincent Keimer, where the Azerbaijani grandmaster managed to score back a very impressive victory with a white color. I mean, in the post-game interview, he said that it was not a very successful tournament for him, so he was just trying to play faster. Obviously, he was tired like everybody else here. And we got the normal Sicilian Najdorf, where black is giving up the d5 square and relying on some typical Sicilian Najdorf tricks. Knight b6, a5, knight c4. About here, you could feel that the position is about equal, but white still has this plan to take over the d5 square. f3, rook c8, and now clearly Keimer's idea was to prepare to push d5, put the queen on c6, rook on d8, and push d5. However, this plan never quite materialized. After knight g3, h3, perhaps here the young German should have pushed d5. For example, d5, knight e5, knight e5, e takes, and rook d8, which looks rather interesting because white cannot really, I guess, play c4 because after queen takes on c4, it's simply a pawn under attack. This did not happen. Instead, Winston played queen c6, and after king h2, now d5 no longer is possible. After a couple of moves, knight continued to improve his position, b3, knight e5, and now we get, again, a very thematic position. So black is threatened to push everything forward at the king side, while white wants to create a passed pawn at the queen side. Bishop f5, c4, you could already feel that white's position is definitely better because suddenly the idea of knight c3, knight a4, knight b6, and c5 starts to look really strong. After bishop g6, b4, of course, black tried to organize something at the king side, first rearranging the rooks, and after f5, knight c3, d takes on c5. Here, black was still doing all right. d6, bishop g5, take on g5, and now after knight a4, here apparently black had to pick up pretty difficult to find move, bishop f7, dislaunching the white queen. And then only after either queen a1 or queen c2, only then take on b4. Well, very difficult move to find, and here Keimer made a mistake. He took on b4, and after knight c5, queen b5, knight a6, it was all game over for the young German. Now suddenly white has a very strong passed pawn, and after rook c1, unfortunately, after rook takes on d6, knight f8 decides the fate of the game in favor for white. For example, king h8, take on g6, rook g6, and this is going to be a mate on the board. Of course, it's easy to miss such an unusual tactic, so it didn't happen. Winston tried something else, and after queen d2, f4, knight e8, b2, this was the final trick, knight e6, white gave up the rook and managed to convert the game to a logical victory. White puts another queen on the board. Very impressive final round game by Kamsky, who, quite true to his positional style, beat the young Uzbeki grandmaster Nurdanbek the Sotoroff, d4, knight e4, and we entered an accelerated dragon. So clearly here, the young grandmaster from Uzbekistan tried to confuse the experienced grandmaster from United States. He played queen b6, immediately a prime pressure against the knight on d4 and the pawn on b2. Now perhaps knight b3 felt more secure. Kamsky chose knight b5, knight c3, and queen d2, leaving an open question what he's going to do with this knight on b1. Now, for a longest moment, black was waiting for white to play knight a3 so that he can enter unusual pawn structure bishop takes on c3. However, after bishop e2, it already was quite obvious it's not going to happen. So after knight f6, f3, we enter a logical Maroczy-bind structure. So here you cannot take the pawn on c4, due to a3, the queen is overloaded, and after queen b3, black loses the queen. So that was a very nice trick by Gata. Instead, show castle was played, and white very quickly grabbed space advantage with an amazing move rook a2, threatening b4, and black simply lacked space. The rest was really downhill for the young grandmaster from Uzbekistan because after b3, queen d8, rook c1, knight e7, queen d1, black was lacking any counterplay whatsoever. He did try to do something, try to play b5. Very powerful move, knight e5, b4, knight c3, and black's position continued to deteriorate move after move. In the end, rook b8, black still insisted to play b5. Kamsky was precise to play c5, stopping any sort of counterplay from black's perspective. Now after the capture, queen f8, rook d2 here, Kamsky continued to gain even more space. You see bishop f3, rook d3, knight b6, e5. Now this is clearly a domination from white's perspective. So here Sotoroff tried to change something. He played bishop h6, threading some knight e5 ideas. And after queen e1, bishop f5, here knight c6 and knight c7, he decided this is the time to sacrifice a piece for 2 pawns. After knight e5, take it, the position simplified, and despite the fact that the white king is weak and black has 2 pawns for the piece, it did not matter. Another powerful move by the American grandmaster, knight e5 and queen e5, and you could feel there is no compensation for the missing piece. The game continued only a couple of moves because the American grandmaster was very precise. Other Sotoroff had resigned. And finally, of course, the final game of the round, the big game which decided the fate of the tournament, was Andrei Yesapenko against Liem, because in the overall rankings before the last round, Yesapenko was trailing by 3 points. To remind you, 4 points is awarded for a game winner. This means Yesapenko had to win on demand to become the winner of the 2022 Grandmaster Triathlon. Now, the game did not disappoint. It started as a topical Ray Lopez line, a4, d4, a5. All of this has been played many times before at the professional circuit. h3, bishop e3, so the pawn on e4 cannot really be taken. There's always bishop d5. Now, rook a8, knight e2, h6. One critical moment arose here. Black decided to relieve pressure from the center and took on d4. The idea was that white is threatened to play d5, c4, and grab space advantage. After e takes, c takes, bishop b7. Here, bishop b1 was a very interesting maneuver, meeting black's knight b4, knight e7. Again, a very tough choice by the top Vietnamese grandmaster, deciding not to put the knight on b4, instead moving it to the king side. Knight h4, white was meeting black's knight g6. Here, bishop c8, game suddenly got incredibly sharp. So white has a pawn majority at the king side, while black is trying to do something good at the queen side. Knight f1, knight g6, take it. And perhaps here, knight g3 was a little bit too slow. Perhaps here white had to play f4. f4, knight takes on e4, and now, again, precisely try to calculate what happens after queen f3 and get to the pawn on g6, because bishop f5, white plays g4, and the knight on e4 cannot be protected. So knight g3 was perhaps a little bit too slow, and this allowed black to play g5 and keep a good control of the dark squares at the king side. Queen c2, white insisted to play e5 at some point. Eventually, the game, after a couple of slower maneuvers, led to the decisive moment. Now, queen d3, here white already is signaling he wants to play e5, try to go for the mate. And after a couple again maneuvering moves, g4, great shot by black. Rook e5 was an extremely interesting exchange sacrifice by Liem. The idea is that after bishop f4, knight e7, black is ready to sacrifice the exchange, true to the spirit of the former world champion Tigran Petrosyan. Now, Yesapenko didn't want to give up the initiative so easily, so he played knight f5, king h8, and h5. So, according at least to the engines, he was doing better, but of course the game is still incredibly sharp. Rook f6, rook e1, queen e8, and apparently after bishop d1, queen h5, queen g3, white was still doing great. The critical moment arose after c4. Captures, captures, and here, rook e3, threatened to play bishop takes on g4, apparently was too much. Here, white had to choose something else. For example, queen c3 was a move, threatened to win the pawn on c4. At the right time, also threatening at some point push away the queen. Perhaps the moves like knight g3, it did not happen. Rook e3 was too much, and now after bishop e3, rook e3, this allowed black to liquidate into an equal endgame. Another great exchange sacrifice, rook f5, take, queen f5, and now already white needs to be a bit careful because he is down a pawn. Bishop g4, queen e5, bishop takes on d7. The draw was agreed because white is already not seriously threatening to win the game. So what does it mean for the overall results of the round 7? You see, again, we had 3 decisive results. And round 7, for the first time, was showing a clear dominance of the white color because throughout the entire tournament, black was scoring better. So here you see Salem scores a win over Domarajo Gukesh. Nadic beat Vincent Keimer, and he managed to climb out from the last place in the overall rankings. Gata Kamsky beat Nodarbek Abdul Sotoroff, while Yesapenko against Liem, the clash of the leaders ended with a draw. And that's the final result. Liem wins the GMT edition of the Biel Chess Festival, year 2022, 35.5 points. Yesapenko, second place, 32.5. And Gukesh, despite the unfortunate finish in the last 3 rounds, scoring only half a point. I mean, in the classical sense of chess, he finished in the 3rd place. Thanks again, everybody, for watching it. Hope you liked it. The Biel Chess Festival 2022 is officially over. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here with us. From the commentators' part, I would like again to thank everybody who made this possible. See you next year, hopefully here in Biel.